Welcome back to another episode of Tech Unhinged, powered by Code District, where tech gets human. I'm your host, Rabia Javed, and joining me today is Lydia, who is the Chief Information Officer at Appreciation Financial, co-founder of Genie AI, and founder of the People's Accords. With over 8 years in data and AI strategy in financial services, she has seen exactly what it takes to modernize legacy industries with AI. Welcome to Tech Unhinged, Lydia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you today, Rabia.
We'll start with the icebreakers, Lydia. We see that most CIOs have a very linear path, but yours also has a martial arts chapter in it. How did that happen for you?
So it happened. I got my master's degree. I had kind of achieved a lot of things I wanted to achieve before. Let's say I was, going to get married and have kids. I wanted to study martial arts. I had a master's degree. I had worked at the UN. I had experience doing research for the World Bank, a lot of things that were really exciting to me, but I wasn't quite ready to just go to an office environment. And this was before COVID. So working remotely was not as common at that time. And in my company, I was able to work remotely and study martial arts as well as do tech things. I kind of worked in the background and I slowly automated my job. I made a lot of little bots that could do my job for me and essentially enhanced our data analytics at the company. And eventually it became so noticeable that the CEO called me and was like, you need to come and show me what you're doing. And I presented to him some of the programs I had worked on. And over a few years, I was promoted to CIO. And so that was a really exciting pathway to know that it wasn't just something, got handed to me. I built it out of my love for data and my love for technology. And it was an excellent opportunity to combine my skill sets as well as showing the power of the internet. And as we'll talk about later throughout this podcast, what can AI do? There's, the internet has opened up information to everyone everywhere, but AI is in some ways the next level of that. So, thank you for your interest in my background and for having me here today.
Yeah, no, we say that where there is a will, there is a way. We see that 92% of leaders say AI is critical, but fewer than 25% have systems ready to support it. That gap has now a name we call the modernization paradox. How do you define it in plain terms?
I think two words really, like context and junk data, summarize why a lot of people they want AI, they know what it is, they see that there's value there, but it's very hard to put it into practice because you have a lot of, as you mentioned, the legacy systems, but also people. Not that people are legacy or outdated, but how do we have a massive workforce that of all ages and all backgrounds. And in order to actually put this in practice, it would need to cover a lot of different knowledge gaps and levels. So I think one of the first steps would actually be not necessarily modernizing the technology, but helping the workforce understand how AI can work in their role and actually educating them on using it in their daily life before it can even become fully agentic. Because engineers can only do so much. An engineer knows his job, he knows code, he knows systems, he knows architecture, but he doesn't know what the person in human resources is doing. He doesn't know how to tell her how to do her job better. And so in order for AI to work across departments, we really need to give it to the people using it and then let them define how it will be used. And eventually the system will modernize and adapt once the people are ready.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, Lydia, when 60 to 80% of IT budgets are just keeping old systems alive and technical debt is sitting at around 1.52 trillion, what does it actually take for leadership to see modernization as a revenue decision?
That is, I think it's a bit of a paradox type of question because modernization, at least I think we're starting to see, has its own risks in terms of once we modernize away from these systems or we're fully on cloud computing or we're fully agentic AI and we're using it to do all of our tests, the consumption rate of data increases and then the storage costs of the data increase. And so in some ways, our modernization costs can continually increase and also stress the bottom line of the business. However, we probably need to focus on balance. We need to have our old legacy systems, maybe especially for highly regulated industries where you must store data for very long periods of time. Find someone who can put all of that old data that just needs to be stored for legal purposes in more cost-effective systems. And then for fast-paced, high-context action items, that can go in the cloud. That should be easy to access. It should be able to interact with AI systems much more quickly than the old legacy environments. I think there's a bit of a play between what is legally required of companies and then what is needed to modernize and adapt and like adopt AI across departments. Another thing that I've noticed is, and I think we'll talk about a bit more, is just junk data, like how much of the data that we're storing is actually required by law, or it's just something that is junk and needs to be deleted, like on individual drives or in team drives from old projects and files that's just stored everywhere. So I'm not sure what it would take for leadership to see it that way. Probably somebody going to the CFO with some written reports of here's exactly how much we're spending on storage, here's how much we're spending on development costs, and here's how much it's going to cost to clean it up, and model different pathways for storage. So it'll cost this much to store here, to clean it. And once the CFO can clearly see those cost comparisons, it will kind of get to the CEO, and change will start to happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Lydia, we see that McKinsey's 2025 survey found that two-thirds of companies are using AI across multiple functions, but only a third of them are able to scale it enterprise-wide. What's creating that gap?
I think it all comes down to data, sometimes data and the people. So there's many factors, obviously. I mean, anyone who works with AI or in a company will talk about security risks, token bloat, AI hallucinations. Can it provide accurate information in context to enable for especially larger companies to be able to use it? I've talked to many people from my own network as well as within our company about, well, why aren't you using AI? And many people just don't feel that it's relevant to them until somebody takes their hand and sits down with them and shows them, ask this, ask that. And then it has to be a realization process from the individual users of what it can do for their job in order for adoption to start taking place. And once you have a larger base of people inside of a company willing to adopt the technology, then more use cases, I think, will start being undertaken throughout all of the different departments. So engineering is usually pretty quick to want to use it, but once they apply it, the end users might not have any idea what to do with this thing you've just brought to them. And so it kind of just dies. Unfortunately, I've seen that happen a lot. I think some of the resistance is that, is this here to replace me? I don't want to do this. I'm skeptical of this. This is going to take my job. And to kind of show people that what it can do for you, because everyone has self-interest, right? And so if my self-interest is to avoid this new change, to avoid this technology, then it's harder to get the organization to actually adopt it enterprise-wide. Whereas if the individuals throughout each department see their self-interest in using it, not just to keep the job, but to make job easier, to make the job faster, better, to have quicker quality of reports. Maybe someone hates doing PowerPoints and they don't realize if I use Claude, I can get my PowerPoint done in 30 seconds and just update it now in Google Slides. And like you said, I think training is really important, but then sometimes, and I've seen this at large companies as well, I won't name drop, they'll take some random person and say, okay, you're in charge of AI. And that person has no idea how to even use AI themselves.
Yeah.
So it's just a bit funny. Eventually, I think, I don't want to say it eventually everyone will be using it, but I already have AI in my car. I didn't have a choice. So I think everyone will eventually be using it and exposed to it in some way, but that gap will close probably in the next 5 years.
You've also said that AI is only as good as the data beneath it. So Lydia, maybe you can tell our listeners about that. What does that look like in process?
Absolutely. And I wanted to touch on the AI, agentic AI part as well, where everyone wants to say, this is AI, this is AI. And some things it's actually not cost effective to put AI, especially if the data underlying it or the context isn't really there. So much of what we call agentic AI can be done by traditional modernization, by traditional automation practices of just using Python or Java or app scripts, things that can be just a simple cost effective. You don't need billion point LLM attached to get some task done, but just calling it AI has been the exciting thing. And AI is, I would say, only as good as the data beneath it, because if you have a lot of junk data that's just old, it's outdated, it's not attached to, I'll speak in the context of appreciation. We have a lot of financial services representatives who come and go over the years. Some people have a special, relationships with their clients who are either their family members or their own, it's their own policy, or it's somebody under 18 who they've written a life insurance policy for a child. But if the AI doesn't have the proper context to understand, for example, you want to use it for marketing. I think copywriting and marketing is one of the easiest tasks for generative AI to accomplish these days. It can still create a lot of problems for a salesperson. They want to implement AI, but it doesn't understand understand their data. It doesn't have the context to know, oh, I can't send an email to this person because they're 12 years old, or I shouldn't try and set an appointment with that person because that's their mom. They can just call their mom. And so there's just a lot of little missteps that can happen. And I'm using a very generic example, but I think it's one that's easy to relate to, of those simple pieces of information that AI is very quick to overlook. And so not only the data underlying it, if is it old, are the policies, is there a good record if your policy is active, surrendered, lapsed? Does it know all of those things before it's going out in marketing? But also, is it able to have the right context of all the relationships underlying the data? And sometimes, especially at our company, things can change quickly. We have agents and clients. We have over 100,000 clients all around the country, and things can change very quickly from day to day, from minute to minute. And having an AI that has secure access to our database is one thing where we don't necessarily want to give it access to every single data point. So now you need somebody to manage that context and make sure that it's giving accurate responses. And we didn't really find that our agents actually enjoyed using the AI we put in our back office, because the context was not able to keep pace with the change throughout the company. So that's why I think just managing data is sometimes, it takes a certain personality. A lot of people, especially in small companies, big companies, doesn't matter, to look at the little details of the data is actually playing a very big role in how successful the AI is going to be.
Lydia, what's your particular framework for assessing and making decisions around legacy systems, as per the exposure or the work that you've done so far?
I love the word intent, and also how, it can mean different things for different people, especially across departments. If I'm in the data or technical department, I think of my intent for one thing for the system, but if I'm missing the context from the other department, that can be a huge issue later down the road, for I didn't know something that I should have included and what was behind the scenes. And so when I'm handling problems, a lot of times I try to start, and I like to take a layered approach. I try to start with what is the most necessary thing? What is the 80% problem here? And I like to write lists, but I'll make a list of what I see as the most visible, I would say, bottom line critical problems, like what is going to affect our sales, what is going to affect the accuracy of our information, and start peeling it apart. So start with that top 80% issue of, there was an automation error in one of our CRMs, for example, where clients were not being labeled as clients, and once their policy was issued, they were still being labeled as leads. So there was a marketing error going out to some of these clients, marketing to them as leads when they were already clients. So that's just an example of, here's like a number one big level issue that we need to tackle right away. As I'm going through the details, I can find the outliers, I can find these small use cases, and then as we're handling the 80% issue, we tend to take care of the 20% along the way. So I like to take like the layered approach, but also a human approach, to consult with the people, not just on my team, but maybe with other teams, to see what are they dealing with and how is, my approach, here's my solution to the problem, but make sure I get input from other departments and other people who are touching the issue, as I guess is one way to say it, that to see how does my solution work with theirs. For example, the finance team might have a certain way that they're doing something and that they're used to doing something, or that maybe from the financial perspective works best. But then when I'm looking at the sales team and the sales department, my solution is more suited for sales than for finance. And so I have to approach things in layers as well as with the human context. And I can't just work in a silo of what I think is logically the best. Because one time we implemented a system that was, in our worldview, perfect. It was automated. It had all the right steps. It was going to be great for the agents. And when we actually released it to the field, everybody hated it because it was perfect for us. It was very logical, but it didn't actually adapt to how the agents do business day to day, how they actually adapt to when they need to call somebody into a meeting, when they need to do things kind of on the fly. And so we went back to the old process. We thought people hate filling out this form. It's so boring. They have to type it. Let's just automate everything. And so my approach has changed over time from doing things like purely logically, like purely by the steps of what's perfect, to, what works for the people, and to try and not necessarily get every single thing perfect right away, but to take care of the major, absolutely necessary issues up front. And then once those are handled, we can take care of the use cases like deeper to the core of the system that will over time make it a more perfect system, at least for our database. I mean, have you had any similar or different approaches from some of the other leaders that you've talked to?
When we talk about legacy see modernization in particular. So there are lots of different frameworks and approaches that people are using. And then that also comes down to, how big of a number that particular business is looking at in terms of their headcount. Is it small scale? Is it an enterprise level or mid-size perhaps? And what's working out for them and what's not? I mean, some of them are still juggling with their internal hierarchies about, the idea of modernization while they're still stuck, with their older systems. The new people are still trying to convince them on improving the budgeting for why this middle layer is now important. And now it's high time they automate their manual tasks. The debate is still about modernization, perhaps, but the jargon has probably changed a bit with agentic AI or workflows, perhaps. Because, yes, absolutely, the Excel sheet that you were taking probably 3 days to get up with, now Claude can probably do it in 30 seconds, as you mentioned. So there are a lot of bottlenecks that we witness in the current landscape. They are on the good side and on the bad side. But, there's definitely progress too. But again, the ones who are trying to catch up or in the game, I think things are probably on the brighter side for them. But, you're also hearing about the massive layoffs at different verticals across the world, and
Yes.
it is quite evident that if you do not have the right skill set to be able to use AI as your assistant, you will be replaced. I mean, to be able to have an assistant, you need to have a good grip on your skill set first. And if you don't have it, then 100%, you're no more in the game.
And I think honestly, people, so when we talk about problem solving and then, going into just getting stuck where some things get stuck, the individual matters so much. Like I've noticed one of the biggest bottlenecks I've come across is people not wanting you to look over their shoulder, feeling judged, because sometimes if you're coming from the technical department and then going into the like non-technical department, they feel like, are you saying you're better than me? Are you saying you're smarter than me? When really I'm trying very hard to say, I want to help you. I want to help you. But when they hear me say, I want to help you be faster and do things in a more efficient way, to me, that's an exciting thing. To them, that's like, well, what's wrong with me? Like, are you saying I'm not good? And so the personality issue has been really interesting of like how to not make people feel like they're not good enough because they see AI as telling them they're not good enough. And if they don't come from a technical background, it's a bit intimidating to say, well, here, just go click on this Google Studio over here. You can create your own workflow. It'll do everything for you. And I think it's just a matter of the effort coming from the different department heads because they already have a relationship with their team. So if the department head has some idea of what to do, they can go to their team and show them what to do. And then they will, essentially have a better, more secure future. But I've also noticed the engineers are the ones getting laid off too.
Yeah.
So, no one is truly safe from the whole AI revolution. But the more that we try to adopt it into our daily routines, I think the company will be better and also job security.
Most experts agree that you shouldn't rip out a legacy system all at once. The safer move is running the old and new systems side by side until you're confident enough to cut over. In practice, what does it look like to you?
So I absolutely agree. Changing too many things at once is horrible. And I tend to save old code, at least, just in case I ever need to put it back if something happens. We like to test things rigorously before deploying them and making small changes at a time instead of pushing massive updates, because some things that even the developers forgot are connected to, like, some reports are connected to something. You push an update and now like something over here is broken that nobody noticed or nobody saw. And it's amazing how often that happens. And I would say, it's not just at my company. We are a smaller company in terms of what our home office size is. We have a large distribution. We are actually we are like the number one company in our niche for serving teachers and in the 403B market, but it's still a very niche market. I mean, we're doing over $300 million in premium, I think, a month. And sometimes for just for, rollovers and life insurance and flow business, but still we're considered like a smaller company. And so we do our best to take our time and test things. But then sometimes we just have to like push stuff out and then fix it as it comes out. One of the reasons that my role became really important in our company as we grew, because we started in the founder's garage with like, a group of 5 people. They started their company and they grew it to the biggest company in our niche. But over time, that changed our technology dramatically. Like, we didn't used to have any technology. It was like Word documents and stuff. And now we have a whole back office. We have like all kinds of platforms and automations. And so those requirements, communicating the requirements to the developers was one of the consistent reasons for failure in deployments, because you would have somebody who would just say, hey, we want this, we need it now. And then it just gets deployed and it wasn't tested because there was such a fast paced environment. But then as we go back and as we've grown to mature, we now make sure that we have testing, we have implementation, we have a protocol, we have support tickets. And sometimes for the people who are used to the good old days, it can be a bit this tug and pull between wanting to move quickly and wanting to get things out there, and also needing to wait for, hey, we have to test it, we have to iterate it, we have to fix this. And so there's, we still feel some of that tug and pull between the wanting to get things done quickly and out there. And that was something that I have really pushed forward very strongly in my role. I remember there was a program, one of the largest programs that I managed, it's several $millions of incentive programs that we do to help our agents build their business. I built this program from the ground up, and now it's one of the defining things that attracts people to our company. But it was essentially first brought to me as an idea on like a Tuesday. And then they're like, so can you roll this out on Thursday? And that's the fast paced environment of also having sometimes a smaller company where people get to meet the CEO, people know him and they see how vibrant his personality is. But my role became very important as we grew to put some of that structure in and say, well, I can get you an outline by Thursday and some general and a test group of how it's going to work. And then we tested it and we iterated it. And now I have 5 years of ROI history to show how we've developed the program, how we've iterated the program, and how we've now made it into something that an agent, we can see when they come in, are they going to be successful or not? And we can support them into now making $50,000 a month, which is really cool.
I think this is really, really impressive. And, you being this open about your entire journey, I think this is also very inspiring for a lot of the people out there. And I think that one thing from your conversation that I've gotten is that how you've always put yourself and stepped out of your comfort zone. And, things and change only happens when, you're not in your comfort zone and you're always just, moving, taking certain actions with certain risk analysis, and then just experimenting and learning perhaps every day. So yeah, no, Lydia, amazing journey.
Yeah, and I know that I'm a very non-traditional CIO, and I'm proud of it. I'm absolutely comfortable with where I'm at, and I love to learn more. I just did in January, I did an MIT professional education certificate because I know a lot about AI, but I want to have the certificate behind me to back me up, to show that, hey, I do know what I'm talking about. And it was funny, as I was going through this program, I felt like I was like miles ahead of it, but sometimes nobody's going to understand that unless you actually have the credentials behind you. And I know we're going to touch on that a bit more, and like, what are some of the challenges, especially coming from a non-traditional background. There's a lot of pressure around like, are you ready for this? Do you know what you're doing? Can you handle what I'm going to give you? And there's some skepticism from some of the old guard of people who they went the traditional path. They're used to things being a certain way, but also they can get stuck in the comfort zone. They can get stuck in things must be this way, and then they don't modernize. And then we end up with like .NET 3 systems that
Gartner predicts 40% of agentic AI projects will fail by 2027 because legacy systems can't support them. What does a system actually need before agentic AI is even on the table?
As a lot of our conversation, we've kind of talked about people, and I think there needs to be a removal, maybe a new approach to how companies operate. Departments make sense, specialization makes sense, but when agentic AI is successful, it kind of needs to be multiple people at once. You have so let's say you want to do a task, and then as if you were hiring a team, that AI agent is going to be that team. And so whoever is building it is going to have to go across departments, across roles, across specializations to understand things. So you can't have one engineer who knows nothing about human resources modernizing across a human resource role, a financial role, a data role, a sales role. We have to have a much more truly collaborative environment. And I know for many companies, from small to large, it's easy to work in silos and sandboxes, and also to maybe not understand each other's language or how each other's workflow and team processes go. So for an agentic AI to be successful, it has to have the right context across departments, access to the right data, the best prompts that are going to make it actually work effectively, that it's actually going to do the job and not waste a bunch of money running in in like useless loops and spitting out junk, which I think AI can be criticized for a lot. That over the next few years, we might, I think, saying that most AI projects will fail by 2027. Yes, but I think in failure, we build opportunity. What is that saying? You fail forward. So, okay, maybe I tried 10 things, 8 of them failed, but the 2 that worked, we now have a model for how to do everything else moving forward. So maybe from 2027 to 2030, we might actually see a lot more success. And we'll probably see companies start changing how some of their departments work, where we hear a lot about cross-functional teams, but I don't know if it's just like a myth. I don't know how well, like from the different people I've talked to, cross-functional teams can be challenging, but I hope that actually AI not only will improve it, but that's what's going to allow it to work. And I truly hope that work becomes better for people, that we'll enjoy our work more because AI is going to do the boring stuff and we get to actually focus on building the fun part of work.
So, Lydia, if 60 to 80% of corporate data is already redundant or obsolete, that we've also talked about at length, and most organizations never hire the people who understand the old system alongside the people building the new one, where does governance even begin in this criteria?
So, and it also depends, I guess, on the industry because different industries will have different governance standards. But I think we need to get sometimes like a middleman, somebody who can communicate between the modernization people and then the legacy people and bring them together. Someone more non-traditional, maybe like myself even, who can help work across the teams to make sure that the old systems actually integrate with the new ones. Like I think in one of the previous questions we went through was finding which data belongs on the new systems and which data can go on the old systems. Or in some companies, you don't even need all of this data. Like if it's not required by law for you to keep 7 years to 10 years of records, it might be worth having each team have a directive to go through, reorganize their drives, archive old files, or delete archives of things where you have copy of copy of copy number 5. And because a lot of companies do, a lot of people do. And so I just think some of it's funny how often I've said the word human in a question, in a discussion about AI and about technology. But at the end of the day, all of this technology, there are humans behind it. And so there's a really famous quote by IBM that says the computer cannot be trusted to make a management decision because it cannot be held responsible. And so at the end of the day, so many of these questions are answered by the humans behind it and not necessarily a pure technical or logical process, but who is the person who can build the relationship, who can communicate with the right terminology to all of the teams to get the job done.
Well, Lydia, you also mentioned previously that probably you have like a 10 years age gap from probably most of the people in your org at the moment. So, does that reflect at a professional level as well, where you would find that probably they are not as up to date with the knowledge in comparison to as probably you are, or maybe most of the knowledge trickles down from probably the CEO only, and only then people start talking or thinking about it?
I love this question because it goes both ways. There are things that I know, and then trying to communicate it in a way that they are going to understand, and vice versa has been a challenge, especially when there's, 20 years of working relationships and a way that people communicate, a way that people operate. And I'm coming in and introducing a lot of change to that. It can be disrupting, it can be off-putting. And so I've had to, try not to get too excited about all the great things we can do to make things better, because sometimes people hear better, whatever that is, whether it's AI or automation or modernization or just even like cleaning up the database, it can sound like I'm not good enough. And so working with the people who are more seasoned in the company than I am, I really want to focus on building relationships with them so that they can see that I'm part of your team. It's been a fine balance of, hey, I want to learn from you, but how do I learn from you without coming off as like, hey, I'm this kid. I'm the new kid in the company. And so there's a balance between learn from me and what I can show you and what I've learned from, all of the new things that are coming out in the universities and, what's the latest in technology that I can bring to the table versus what I can learn from them and how did they build the system? What were the reasons behind the way it was built? Because some of that context is also missing in modernization. When you have a new team or a new technology come in, they just want to update everything without realizing there was a reason that things and a logic to how it was already made that we don't want to disturb too quickly. I'm sure it makes sense, and you can probably say it in different ways.
Financial services is one of the most regulated industries in the world, and yet AI is being deployed faster than the rules governing it. What risks are quietly building up in that window?
I'm excited about this question. I really love this question because not only in the financial services industry, but also in government, healthcare, and I think a lot of just other tech companies or public facing companies, there's a gap. So some people are using AI way too fast. Just like you have, Debbie, often social services, who's uploading case files into ChatGPT to help her do her work. That's a huge risk. And some people just don't see it yet. They don't see that you cannot upload your, personal information into this LLM, which is essentially being stored in a database somewhere that can be hacked. That is maybe is you're sharing personal private information with an external third party that is technically against regulations. But in financial services, in my industry specifically, we have a lot of rules about personal information, how it should be shared, how it should be accessed, or really not shared at all. There's a lot of information that I deal with and my team and everyone in our company deals with every single day that is extremely personal and private. It's not as much as I guess healthcare would be considered, but there's a saying that's, you don't mess with people's kids and you don't mess with their money. So one of the things that we've done or that I took a step towards doing when I first saw AI coming out, I felt like I was very ahead of the curve on this because nobody understood what I was talking about when I kept telling about the risks of using AI with anything, especially in our industry, because that personal information. So what we did, we created a platform specifically for our company and for our office users that you can connect to Claude, ChatGPT, any LLM, but we put a tokenization layer into the prompt window that essentially identifies, it's based off of Microsoft's Presidio technology, and it identifies any PII, such as even anything from, and you can choose like the strength level, but it can be very high or very low, but it will recognize credit card, social security number, name, email, data that you don't necessarily want to go into a third party company, and then tokenize it in transit and then bring it back decrypted. And so the user doesn't see this process. They don't feel the process, but it essentially prevents our clients or our agents' information from going to external sources and being used to train other models. Because I think in April of last year, or was it on time flies, I think it was April 2023, OpenAI was hacked. I mean, this wasn't like widely advertised, but just to show that even some of these companies that we think are so big and untouchable, they do get hacked, data does get leaked. And then at the end of the day, we are liable for how we use their platform. So I was really proud of this development. I think now I've seen some companies that specialize in this type of PII identification and protection when using LLMs, but the legislation will have to keep up. Like, how can we utilize it? It has not been clearly defined. So we try to be very careful, and we'll see. We'll see how things develop.
Post-migration, organizations tend to celebrate the finish line too early. What's the metric that actually tells you it worked? Not the one that IT reports up with, but the one that sort of really matters.
I think it comes down to users and sales, specifically for our appreciation financial. If we have people using it, so for us, our people are our agents. If we introduce something and it's being used, then we know it's working. We know it's good. If we have increased sales, we know it's good. If we know nobody's using it and sales are dropping, it's not working. So for us, that's probably a very simple, straightforward metric, but I think it's the telltale sign.
According to Brookings, 86% of the workers are most exposed to AI replacement are women, and yet according to IMD, women hold fewer than 14% of senior AI leadership roles. As someone building the technology and sitting in the leadership seat herself, how do you sit with this ongoing tension?
I feel that. I think honestly, I have advocated for replacement of certain roles where it was a woman in the role, and it all came down to economics. I would encourage women to use AI to make their work better, faster, stronger, and stand out. Because at the end of the day, if your job is, if you cost $200 an hour and you're producing work that an AI model can do in mere seconds, as a company leader, I cannot justify the cost. I cannot sit with the CFO and the CEO and review the budget and review the numbers and say, we're going to keep her on staff just because we like her. At the end of the day, companies won't run like that. And it's really sad because I have seen people I love and care for dearly lose their jobs from these type of decisions. And unfortunately, I have pushed for some of these decisions where I could see I cut a $20,000 budget for some parts of our company because I said AI can do this. I feel personally guilty when I see some of the results of maybe a more stressed out department leader who doesn't feel prepared to take on using AI for her department now has had a massive budget cut. And then the people who think that AI should not be replacing content creation or copywriting are feeling very snubbed and actually becoming even more an anti-AI. In some ways, it has the opposite effect of what I intended for. So how I'm dealing with it is to try and step in to work more closely with the people that I'm impacting in those decisions, to show them ways and opportunities that they can increase their value with AI so that it doesn't become a question later on of, are you worth what we're paying for this service? Because AI can do it faster.
But then, I also wanted to maybe make it more precise by asking you this other question, which adds to it, that do you think that this is a him or a her issue or a generational issue, perhaps, with the tendency of people not being able to adapt to the tools or maybe self-learn or being able to use AI or maybe just rely entirely upon an AI model and not have a skill set of their own? Because in my experience, perhaps, I've noticed that it is at times a generational problem too, with Gen Z, perhaps.
Absolutely. I think this is an excellent point where some people look at, is it a gender issue? I think saying it's a generational issue is much more accurate because we did let someone go who was, from from an older generation, I should say, but he used to be like a rocket scientist. He used to work on top secret projects, but he was not willing to adapt to the new systems, to the new models, and it became a liability. And I've definitely seen the complete opposite, where there's some people who are younger and all they do is AI. And sometimes it's overproducing. Like I'm sure you've seen when you prompt, let's say Claude for something, and then it produces a 13-page report. Nobody's going to read those 13 pages because they lack a lot of context. It produces kind of irrelevant parts that we don't really need to see. So there needs to be some middle ground. And I think, I think training and who is going to be the trainer is something that I often wonder is like, I don't necessarily have time to be the trainer. Do I even trust a lot of the consultants who say they can train my company because they don't know our business? They don't know what we need. Because I've seen some of my best team members don't use AI at all. I'm thinking of one person, particularly if she sees this podcast, she'll know who she is. She is so detail oriented. Like she has like laser vision. She can catch everything. And you still need people like that to catch the AI issues who are willing to look at the details, because I have lots of people in the younger portion, I guess, of our team who they'll use AI no problem, but it's easy to overlook some of the mistakes that it makes. So I would say that tension can easily be managed by teamwork. I think teamwork is one of the most important things to have in a company to help remove silos, go outside of sandboxes, and have real discussions across, the generational age gaps, and even sometimes the not just department, but like seniority, because sometimes the senior leaders, they know everything, they have a vision, but don't necessarily get the feedback from the field or from the people that are working day to day on the ground, and to just have more checks at every level.
Great answer. Moving towards the last question, Lydia, what's the one thing you've had to unlearn on this journey that you wish someone had told you earlier?
There's a few things. There's a lot of things I've learned, and then what have I unlearned? And some of it is that the way that we used to work of like, you need to be an expert on this one thing and like that's it, not how things are, especially at the leadership level, as I've been, and gratefully so, been put into more and more of a leadership from my curiosity to learn things, is that things should not, I really don't think things should be sandboxed departmentally. There needs to be more openness. There needs to be more cross collaboration. In some ways, I've also had to step back from some of my openness personally. To be a leader, I've also had to not be so accessible, not be so available to help, to set very firm boundaries with people sometimes as well. And one of the things that makes me think about that is when you use the term resource, because some people at the top level of a company, everything is a resource. Whether you're a human or whether you're talking about cloud storage, all of these are resources at the end of the day that help the company grow and operate. And so when you remember that the people that you're dealing with, sometimes they just see you as a resource, and if you're not meeting their needs, then you are no longer a resource that they want to use, and it's not human. And I've always always focused on, especially with my work with the People's Accords, which we didn't talk about on this, but anyone who's watching this is welcome to go look up the People's Accords and learn more about how we use technology in more of a people-based startup type of mission. So we can maybe even meet again to talk about that. I would love to. But to take away some of that human element and just be more willing to be black and white and to balance that, when to know based on the situation of, should I call the whole team in for a meeting and work on this together? Or do I need to say, nope, we're only having 2 people on this call and we're going to get it done? I know the question was about unlearning, but I find it to be more of adapting. How have I learned to adapt to situations more quickly instead of having like a solid playbook?
No, I think that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you, Lydia, so much for being super honest with us and our listeners. This was a great conversation.
Thank you, Rabia, for having me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to talking to you in the future.